Time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Election day. Light turnout, very, very light turnout in person. I think that's because a lot of people voted by mail. I think that's going to be kind of a norm for a while and not a bad thing. I think other states do it so much better. I think it's Oregon who does all mail-in ballots. They do very little in-person stuff, and it works very well. Our Republican friends never going to go for it because, look, they like coming to the polls. They like being angry at people because today I spent a little bit of time at a poll. As people were coming and going, not a lot, very few people came up, but you could easily tell who the Republican voters were going to be because they were angry. They were ticked. They were ready. They were ready to come out and vote for those ballot questions to strip the governor of any power so that we can have a neutered government because that's what Republicans believe. Small government. Ineffective government, worthless government. That's what kind of whipping boy kind of government. That's what they want. So not surprising me that the angry folk did come out, and we're going to see what the results are. I'm interested to see just how the ballot questions here played out, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But first, the other good news today: my Congressman Scott Perry, again on the wrong side of history. He has a habit of doing that. One of those people, I give full credit for January 6th for. Congratulations, Scott. You and the rest of the cabal fully responsible for that. But today, the House of Representatives voted 364 to 62 to pass the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act to protect Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. 62 Republicans voted for hate. I guess 62 in the House and 1 in the Senate. 94 to 1. The legislation passed in the Senate. Josh Hawley being the one Republican in the Senate who said, no, we like our hate right out in front. Expected, yes. Predictable, sure. Scott Perry, no question about it. Always on the wrong side of history. Also today, Mitch McConnell hath come out and said he's open to the January 6th commission, whereas Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy not. And look, if the talk were to be, I'm going to be subpoenaed and I'm going to be on the hot seat and grilled for being a part of all of this and having a lot of information of what the former guy did on that day, I don't know that I'd be in favor of it either. If I were complicit, I think this is one of those moments where you go, I wish I could plead the fifth. And that's interesting. Does he get to plead the fifth? And what will happen if and when he does? I think that very, very interesting, but it's going to happen. Commission's going to happen because we need it. This is the only way I think we get by January 6th. We hold people accountable. So today's little rant that starts off with, I happened to catch CNBC. And they had one of their, their business shows, and they're talking business because that's what they do. And they had a reporter come on, and he was saying that a conservative group, they're launching ads against Nike, against American Airlines, and against Coca-Cola. People that they view as woke capitalists. They're against woke capitalism. These corporations who want everyone to vote and came out against the things that happened in Georgia, they're angry at, ticked off. So they've gathered a 7-figure amount, and they're going to spend it. Guess where? Guess where they're going to spend a good portion of that 7-figure unholy war chest? CNBC. So, I'm watching this and I'm going, hold on a second. Wait a second. Hold on. Whoop, back up. So CNBC is reporting on a story that they are a part of and not really talking about that. There's something wrong with the fact that they're talking about a story that they're a part of, that they're going to be the mouthpieces to be the attack dog. They're basically the teeth in the dog. And it came off as a news story. And I sat there and I'm going, there just seems something, I don't know if it's wrong or if it's just completely out in the open now, that our media structure is bought and paid for. It's just a propaganda arm of whichever special interest is paying out the highest. They're, the oldest profession in the world without the actual physical act. I mean, figuratively, yes. We're getting it badly, but not literally. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, hold on. You've got this conservative group who's now concerned that corporations have gotten too powerful because they want people to vote, that they're now siding with their customers. Who would have thought a company would care what their customers thought? Who would have ever thought that corporate America would care what their customers thought? Wow. But here we are. People put pressure on them and they reacted. The business, you had 100 corporations on this Zoom call that just has the Republicans throwing fits because I guess they believe that Zoom call should have been how Republicans can screw voters down the road worse. Because understand, and this is the part that's amazing to me, corporate America has been the backer, the owner of the Republican Party for decades. It's who funds all of their folly. And now that you've gone too far, now that the party has gone full on wackadoodle nutcase, they're going a little too far. A little too far, guys, because now it's hurting our profits. Now we got to care what customers have said. Because you remember, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, the Business Roundtable, finally woke up and said, it's no longer about maximizing shareholder wealth. It's no longer only about our greed. It's no longer Gordon Gekko, greed is good. It's now we care about stakeholders. We care about our workers. We care about our customers. We care about our communities. Oh, we care. And I'm going, bull. You care about profit. The only reason you now care is because every one of us are going, hey, do better, or we're not going to buy your products. And this is all because, and this is the part that's important. This is where corporate America has put themselves. This is where the Republican Party has forced them. Because, it was okay back, 70s into the 80s, even into the 90s when nobody knew corporate America was funding all of these think tanks and the American Legislative Exchange Council and ALEC and, all these, nobody knew. The money just, it was funneled through all kinds of different channels. Then they had to come out and say, yes, we're responsible for this. And now everyone knows. And then you had Mitt Romney of Corporations Are People. Then you had Citizens United. Then you had all of this. Money is speech. So corporate dollars now equal speech. So people are going, well, if that's the case, we got to hold corporations accountable, right? So what this crazy conservative group is going to do, I love their name. They are Consumers Research. Making you think they care about consumers. They're going to go after the CEO of American Airlines, a guy named Doug Parker, because he has a really high CEO pay. And my thought is, where have you been for the last, forever? Where have you been the last 30 years as CEO pay has been going completely off the charts? Where have you been? Didn't matter because they were doing their bidding. Now something's gone against them. Now they're going to bring it up. Understand, I give corporations no passes. They're all wrong. Even in this moment where they've, for a brief moment of time, come out in public and say, well, maybe it's gone too far. They're still all wrong. And yes, CEO pay is out of control. Yes, they should be held accountable. But in this brief one little second, saying, you know what, I think people should be allowed to vote. I think every citizen should be allowed to vote. I don't think is wrong. They go after the head of Coca-Cola, James Quincy, because America is fat, especially children. And again, that's not new either. This is something that they've been talking about for, again, 40 years. But again, Johnny come lately. They need this because to take it on as their own to attack. Also, the Nike CEO, John Donahue. And this is the most laughable one. Considering Nike has never made a pair of tennis shoes in the United States, they're going after Nike for forced labor in China. And I've been saying, where you been on that one forever? Which is why in our family, we have boycotted Nike from the beginning. I've never owned a pair of Nike anythings because of their labor practices. But, the Johnny Kim latelys at the Consumers Research, they found the nut. Oh my gosh, we found something. And maybe the minions on the right will listen to them. Maybe they care. And, I love this frame that they're now coming up with, woke capitalism. Corporate America now caring what people think, which is nonsense. They don't. They care about the bottom line. They don't want to get boycotted. They don't want sales to drop. They want to keep raking in the cash. And which is why I said from the beginning they should have never gotten into the political game whatsoever. They should have stayed out of it. But here they are, right smack dab in the middle. And I'm hoping there's some woke capitalism. I'm hoping workers wake up to the reality that corporate America has been screwing them for decades. I'm hoping that we're somewhat woke to the reality that discrimination has been rampant in corporate America. I'm hoping at some point we wake up to the fact that women have been getting shafted for decades because of unequal pay. I'm hoping we wake up to that. I'm hoping we do one thing. I'm hoping we unionize. I'm hoping we demand better. And we're seeing it in the low-wage workforce because there's a little bit of unemployment money that's helping them survive, which is why the Republicans, again, are trying to force them back with work requirements and cutting off funding and all of those things that they do to make desperate, exploitable workers. Because here's the reality, and this is not new. What I'm going to say is not new. It's not. I'm not Magellan discovering new lands. I'm not a rocket scientist or a genius. I just look at the facts. The fact of the matter is that from the 1940s to the mid 70s, productivity and wages walked hand in hand. The average productivity in a year for the American workforce was about 2%. Wages went up about 2%. So it was the meritocracy. You did a little bit more work, you shared a little bit more in the profit. The better the company did, the better the workers did. It was a nice marriage. Why? Strong unions. 35% of the nation's workforce in the private sector were unionized. Mid-70s to about now, you've got basically a dead line. Flat line. Productivity has gone up exponentially. Wages, dead. And in fact, the folks over at EPI have pointed out that the typical worker earned $23.15 in 2017. Had their wages kept up with productivity, it would have been another $10 on top of that. And this bears out to what I was talking about the other day. In my experience, when I started in the freight business in the late 80s, I was making $14 an hour in that day's dollars, $31 in today's dollars. Today, that job starts off at $18. Right about the same, it was a little bit bigger of a jump, but right about that $10, $12 an hour, $13 an hour difference. And where'd that money go? Didn't go to the workers, and it sure as shine didn't go to the consumers. It went to the shareholders. It went to the CEOs. It went to the upper crust. It went to the people who the hardest day's work they do is shoveling money from one pocket to the other. And we were told, just have to work harder. Just have to do a little bit better. We need to give corporations more because, well, that's how they're going to invest. And I had this opportunity today to talk to a couple of young girls, college age, because we were sitting with nothing to do for a good portion of the day because very few people showed up to the polls. And we began talking about their prospects. What jobs do they hope to find? What kind of employment do they hope to find? What kind of lives do they hope to lead? And they've been sold on this idea that they've got to figure out how to make their own gig, that they've got to be entrepreneurs. And, this girl's, explaining what sounds to me to be a Ponzi scheme that I fear she's going to get really cheated on because it happens to so many workers. Instead of going, you know what, there is solid employment for people who want and need jobs, we now have to go out and, figure it out. We're going to all be our own bosses, all working 80 hours a week just to make ends meet. And all in all, who makes the profit? Jeff Bezos. The extraordinarily wealthy. The ones at the top of the Ponzi scheme. And this is why I look at someone like Joe Biden. And as I was explaining to the people we were talking to, Biden wasn't my first choice. But I think he was the best choice. Because he is moving us back to a moment where the idea that hard work pays, that workers have the right to organize and to collectively bargain. Because what we know is how that $10 an hour got stolen away, how those wage increases deadlined had everything to do with horrible legislation, such as bad trade deals, with corporate America fighting unions and doing everything they can get away, like posting anti-union nonsense in the bathroom stall, so you don't even get a second of peace away from their assaults in the bathroom, and massive tax breaks. A massive redistribution of wealth from the people who actually, with their hands, blood, sweat, and tears, create the wealth of this country, to the people who, again, shifting money from one pocket to the other. And the hope is her generation wakes up and says no more. So the hope is maybe we do have a little woke capitalism, and maybe we act on it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Tennessee Valley Authority Act. The act created the TVA as a federal corporation and was tasked to address the resource development of the region, one of the poorest in the nation. These included flood control and improved travel along the Tennessee River. It also meant improved forestry to address soil erosion and facilitation of agricultural production. Control of water resources required a series of dams designed to navigate the river and reduce flooding. Though Wilson Dam had been completed before the establishment of the TVA, the authority had embarked on the construction of 16 more dams. During the Depression, the TVA hired tens of thousands of workers for conservation, construction, and development. Historian Eric Loomis notes that though the TVA was one of the region's largest employers of black workers, the authority also maintained rigid lines of segregation in its workforce. He adds that though 14 AFL unions eventually worked on dam construction, the agency initially refused to recognize unions. Workers would have to wait until 1940 to sign first contracts in the anti-union South. Today, the authority is most well known for its supply of electricity to nearby communities. It is the nation's largest public power company and serves about 80,000 square miles in the southeastern United States. TVA capacity to generate electric power includes some 29 hydroelectric dams, 11 coal-fired power plants, 3 nuclear plants, and several combustion turbine installations. It also has several solar and wind installations. The authority produces more than 130 billion kilowatt hours of electricity each year. The TVA played a critical role in transforming the South by constructing infrastructure necessary for modernization and industrialization.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the weekend, a Tesla, a 2015 Tesla Model S, was on autopilot and, well, smashed into a cop car. How would you like to be the guy in the car that said, "Oh, I didn't mean to hit your car. It was on auto. It wasn't me. It was the car who did it. The car drove into you, officer. I swear, it wasn't me." There's part of me that goes, I think the guy probably did it on purpose. But probably not. But evidently, the cop pulled somebody over. There was an accident. He was on the side of the road and got sideswiped by the autopilot vehicle. And this is one of those moments where you start talking about what are we going to do in the coming weeks, months, and years as we move to more automated vehicles, maybe even big trucks. Here to share some thoughts on what that could look like, I've asked Greg Regan to come talk with us. He's the Secretary-Treasurer of the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Today, he testified in front of the Subcommittee on Consumer Protection and the Commerce Committee on Energy and Commerce on just this, the promises and perils and the potential of automobile technologies. Greg, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So the story with this Tesla, we've seen a couple of these automated vehicles smashing into things. This one's kind of ironic in a cop car. This stuff happens, and it's going to happen as we have more of these vehicles on the road, I believe.
That is 100% true. And you know, what's scary about it, and the proponents of automated technology will tell you that they're going to save lives. This is safer, that most accidents are human error. But when we talk about traffic accidents right now from manually operated vehicles, that is well-documented data. That is the full sample size of all the drivers in the United States. When you look at automated technology, that is voluntarily supplied data. So people that are actually testing this stuff and giving out, information about what the future might be, we don't have a real sense about how safe it is, and there aren't strict federal guidelines in place to make sure that it's going to be safe. And Tesla, we're talking about level 2 automation, which is very, very low. If you're talking about self-driving vehicles, that's much further away, and that tech is a lot more uncertain right now.
Yeah, I mean, the trucking industry where I come out of, they're licking their chops, can't wait. Everyone has seen the Budweiser truck, Otto, who, made the first delivery of beer without a human being. And corporate Americans, they're thrilled because, hey, we can get our transportation needs met and we don't have to pay those pesky people.
Yeah, I mean, look, I understand why they're doing it. I mean, everyone wants to reduce their overhead, but it's just extremely short-sighted for legislators to think that we should just be speeding this along and removing every roadblock you can to delivering these vehicles to the road. And, you're thinking about safety. Safety is a really important part of this. We need to make sure it's fully tested, that it's not going to endanger people, other operators on the road, pedestrians, bicyclists, all of those things. We also need to think about the workforce implications long-term, because you're looking at, I think the estimates in the commercial driving sector alone from automation is 3 million jobs that could be lost or drastically altered. What happens to our economy if you have 3 million people just like that are gone? And we should be thinking about that. We have the tools right now to be able to address this on the front end. Why are we trying to just rush this stuff to the market right now?
Yeah, no, I've said, for a while, I think in the next 10 years, you're going to see the end of long haul truck driving. Where you're going to put a set of doubles or a truck on the turnpike here in Pennsylvania. You're going to run it through the Ohio Turnpike, through the Indiana Turnpike, right there to Chicago, where it'll then be put on another kind of track, almost like a trackless train track, if you will. Is that too ambitious, do you think? Do you agree that 10 years we're probably going to see some of these convoys of trucks nationwide, as we've seen in places like Arizona and Nevada?
I think that's a little more ambitious than I would say. I think even experts and one of the panelists, the Republican panelists on the hearing today, was saying we're not there yet. We have 20, maybe 30 years before you're talking about full autonomy, where driver is not necessary at all. But the important thing is we're setting the rules right now. We're writing the regulations right now to make sure it's done safely. One point I made in the hearing that I like to make is, too often, if you look at other areas of transportation, the FAA, for instance, is often referred to as the tombstone agency, where regulations are written in blood, meaning there's a catastrophe that happens, people died, and that's when good regulation happens, whether it be rest and training rules or whether it be, aircraft certification that we saw with Boeing most recently. We have an opportunity now with the brand new technology to prevent that from being the case, where we start at the beginning and make sure that it's totally safe before we deploy it, before we have to respond to a situation where dozens or hundreds of people died because there was a flaw in the technology. And that's, I think, a really important role that Congress and the administration have to play here.
Yeah, I mean, my fear has always been throughout this entire discussion, and this is not new. This is something that we've talked about on this program numerous times over the years. My fear is that corporate America has such outweighed power that a lot of this stuff gets pushed through, and we don't ever get a voice or a say. And before you know it, you got 80,000-pound vehicles careening down the road with nobody behind the wheel.
Yeah, and the thing I've heard over and over again is if we don't do this now, if we don't rush, we're going to get beat by China. China's going to win the race on autonomy, and or any other country. They're going to set the rules. And I would say, what does win the race mean? Because we are the largest, if not the number one largest, the second largest consumer market in the world. The manufacturers are going to want to be able to sell this stuff here. We have a chance to set a really high bar, and that really high bar is going to be both in terms of safety, workforce considerations, environmental impact. All this stuff is something we can write the policy for now to get it right. And frankly, if we can do something where we are not only growing and innovating from a tech perspective, but also growing job opportunities and creating career ladders and apprenticeship programs so the workforce is brought along with the technology, that would be a really, frankly, precedent-setting opportunity, and one that we could set the example for the rest of the world on this.
Yeah. Now we're not just talking about big trucks; we're talking about all kinds of vehicles. Because I'm sure you've seen them. There was talk in Philadelphia of having like little food delivery carts, running around, these little robot things running all over the place, delivering stuff. That kind of stuff as well, because that causes, those things cause opportunities for danger as well.
Yeah, no, all of it, and it's all the same. When it comes down to it, it's the same technology. So, there have been previous legislation that exempted vehicles over 10,000 pounds. Say we're going to try to create waiver systems and exemptions for small vehicles, little delivery things, and personal vehicles. But it's all fundamentally the same technology that's going to be going into a lot of these different vehicles. So we can't just try to wall off one sector of the economy, because this tech is going to come. And we're not naive enough to think we can stop it necessarily, but we do think that with appropriate policy making and with the right safeguards in place, we can actually have innovation that doesn't come at the expense of people, but actually grows the economy for everybody.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not somebody who says, we need to smash the machines. I know
Right.
that this technology is coming, and it may down the road be something very, positive and helpful for society. But I worry about those 3 million people, myself included. Although I'm getting towards the end of my driving career, I worry about the next person who's coming behind me who needs these jobs to be able to support their family. We have done a horrible job in this country of helping those who have lost jobs because of bad trade deals, technological changes, whatever. We have done a really bad job of helping that generation who's losing out. I mean, you look at all of the people who lost jobs because of deindustrialization. We basically just left them high and dry. I would hope now we learn lessons and we make sure that we don't leave those folks high and dry in the future.
And you're 100% right. And perhaps more importantly is making sure that the jobs that come up are quality jobs. They're middle-class jobs, jobs that people can earn a living from and retire with dignity on at the end of them. Too often people say, well, we'll create other jobs. The economy will absorb these job losses and other people will have new jobs. Well, the quality of the job makes a big difference. A lot of times what you're talking about, the ones that could be lost here, are unionized jobs with good retirement, healthcare, benefits. And we can't be in a situation where we're just replacing middle-class jobs or low-income, scraping by jobs, and it's just going to be a disaster for our economy and for, frankly, the majority of Americans who rely on this for work.
It's again, it's something we need to get really in front of. So, what was the mood today in talking about where we're heading?
It was really positive, I thought. I mean, obviously, there are people that want to see this. They want America to be a leader. They want us to be out ahead of other countries and competitors. But with very few exceptions, members of Congress were talking about the need to address workforce questions and the need to address safety questions. And between me and Jason Levine from the Auto Safety Coalition, we were providing them with the answers to some of these complicated questions. We presented a framework that we worked with along with the Teamsters and developed to principles that any AV legislation should be based upon. And by and large, people were very receptive to the arguments we were making.
So walk me through some of those basic tenets of what should be in legislation that we're talking about.
Number one is safety. We can't have exemption-based and waiver-based regulations. That can't be what we do off the bat. If we're going to be releasing new tech into onto our roadways where millions of people operate every day, we can't just be saying go do it and we'll figure out the complications later. There is an auto safety alliance that has safety tenets that we think are a key part of it. The other part is making sure that there are letters of opportunity for the workers that are at these that could be affected by this, and making sure that the unions are a big part of that. So collective bargaining agreements are going to be able to translate, making sure that there are notifications, advanced notifications, workforce impact assessments when these things are deployed with public dollars. And then also making sure that equity issues are a strong concern here, so that we're making sure, if you look at 40% of bus drivers are people of color, or commercial drivers are people of color, and women provide a big part of that workplace as well. How do we make sure that those people aren't disproportionately harmed when we are advancing this technology into the workplace, and that they have an opportunity to move, whether it be within the same agency, if it's a transit agency, or within the same company, that they have the training opportunities and the apprenticeship programs available so they can grow their careers and find work advancing this technology in a different way without sacrificing the benefits that they've earned.
I've often said that I'd like to see something of a technology tax as we automate and those jobs become computerized. That there's got to be some kind of a technology tax to help pay for the workers who are displaced because of it, so that we have an easy transition. Because look, I know truck drivers who are making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. The second you take that job away from them, most of them, the best prospects they're going to end up with are $25,000, $30,000 a year jobs. Sorry, most people can't live that way. There's got to be something that softens that blow, that guarantees some income and makes that transition easier when this happens.
That's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the reports, the economists have said that for displaced workers, their earning potential is severely depressed, and you're talking 10 years after they're displaced. You're setting back an entire generation of people, and especially in a country where wage inequality is already so high. If we're going to allow this type of disruption into the workforce to take place without seriously considering the impacts and how we can mitigate the effects on working people, then we're failing as policymakers. We're failing as a government at that point.
Yeah, now I'm sure someone made the argument that we need this, Greg, because there aren't enough drivers. We have a labor shortage. We've got a labor shortage. Just like in the restaurant industry, we've got a labor shortage, Greg, because those lazy people don't want to do the job. And I've said that if we truly had a labor shortage, if in the trucking industry there truly was a labor shortage, wages would go up and conditions would get a whole lot better. And yet that doesn't quite seem to be happening as much as one would expect.
Yeah, we have a good job shortage. We have a shortage of people willing to pay people what they're worth. And that's too often the case. I mean, you see it in the pilot industry, not to go back to aviation again, but they always talk about a pilot shortage. No, we don't have a pilot shortage. We have a shortage of people willing to work for $20,000 a year and work their way up through decades and put themselves in debt. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. We end up losing a lot of pilots to go fly for big carriers overseas because they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, I actually know a couple people who just that. You're spot on, right? So last line of questioning I've got for you, because as I said, I'm not a Luddite. I do think that there is some advantage to this, especially as I get older. In the next 20 years, there may be a point like my grandmother. We took her driver's license, and as soon as you took her mobility away, her quality of life went down. I think automated vehicles could be a good thing for somebody in their retirement years. So I'm not against it. I'm not horribly opposed, but again, it comes back to what you said. We have to have safe. It has to be safe. There has to be some equity involved, and it's got to be heavily regulated.
Yeah, and not once in our testimony, and not once during the question and answer did we ever say stop tech. That's not what we're calling for here. We're really just calling for them to do it the right way. And I meant what I said earlier. There is a unique opportunity right now for the federal government to address potential problems on the front end and not have to go back and say, whoops, wow, I didn't see this coming, and then try to put the genie back in the bottle. I mean, this is fairly unique because we have seen it coming. We see what the potential impacts can be. We have examples throughout history of when these big disruptions to the workforce happen, what it does. And I think there is a responsibility for these lawmakers and for the federal government, for the regulators to do it right. And we're willing to be a partner here. We want to be there with them and do it the right way. We're not going to tell them F no on this on technology, because we're not stupid.
Right. And the other part of this, my great fear right now is all this stuff runs on the internet, basically. I mean, it's all web-based, is it not? I mean, it's all GPS-based. The 5G technology that they keep talking about are how these things are supposed to communicate. And we're so far, China and the rest of the world in 5G technology. I don't think I'll ever feel safe at where we are, given the position that we're in, especially with China having the world's lead in 5G technology.
Well, cybersecurity is another big part of this. Let's be honest. We saw the ramifications and how easily an adversary can hack into a critical part of our infrastructure with what happened at the Carolina pipeline and the disruption that causes. Can you imagine if someone figures out a way to hack these computers in these cars and then take control of the vehicles? I mean, these are all questions that I hope people are seriously considering. And frankly, that was one of the things I found most promising from the Republican side of the committee today, was that they were raising concerns about cybersecurity that hopefully will cause them to take a breath and realize we need to do it right.
Calm it down a little bit. But Greg, I appreciate your being there. I appreciate your voice, and I'm glad you came and shared some thoughts with us. I hope you'll come back again real soon and keep us up to date.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Greg Regan. He is the Secretary-Treasurer there at the Transportation Trades Department of the AFL-CIO. Make sure you check out their website, ttd.org. We'll get links out so you can do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that Maggie Kuhn stood before a group of reporters to tell them about her organization, the Gray Panthers. The idea for the group had started 2 years earlier. 65-year-old Maggie had received the unwelcome news that she was going to be forced to retire from her executive position with the United Presbyterian Church. Maggie was not ready to retire. Instead, she started to organize. This was during the era of the Vietnam War protests, and Maggie found allies with young people who also wanted to see changes in society. The original group developed to build connections between young and old. They called themselves the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Later, they shifted their name to the catchier Gray Panthers. The Panthers adopted the motto, Age and Youth in Action. In 1975, the Panthers held their first national convention in Chicago. 200 Panthers attended, representing representing 37 states. At the convention, the Panthers adopted a platform of issues. They included issues important to seniors, such as an end to mandatory retirement, better housing for the elderly, and expansions to rent control. But the platform also included other social justice issues, including support for the Equal Rights Amendment, a call for full employment, amnesty for Vietnam draft resistors, and even, after much debate, the legalization of marijuana. In the more than 40 years since their founding, the Gray Panthers have continued to advocate for a variety of issues. One key achievement was a court victory to make Medicare regulations more understandable to seniors, and they were years ahead of the nation by supporting single-payer health care for all. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, Ford unveiled its electric F-150, the Lightning, and I got to tell you, it looked really cool. It looked like a great pickup. I mean, it looked fantastic, and there was Joe Biden in the driver's seat. I guess he was in Michigan looking at the factory saying, hey, we're building this here, and we're going to make sure that we build it here. But I thought it looked like an awesome truck. It looked like fun to drive. I can't wait till they start producing them and make them in a sufficient number so that a poor guy like me can afford one. But here to share some thoughts on the possibilities of the F-150 Lightning pickup truck being everywhere, I've asked our good friend Scott Paul. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, to come share some thoughts with us. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be with you as always,
So
especially on a day like this. I have my Made in Detroit shirt on, so I'm super happy about Biden getting to a UAW factory.
Did you happen to see the video of him driving around in that?
I did. That was pretty cool. First, it's probably shocking that they let him drive a test vehicle, basically, but I don't think there's any stopping him. He's a car guy, and looked like he was having a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was an open track. I mean, it was like an airport. Yeah. It's like an airport runway. I didn't think he was going to bump into anything, unlike the Tesla that drove into the police car. But this is exciting stuff to me. To me, the innovation, the research and development that went into this, the fact that we're finally coming out with something to be really competitive, and because look, we've been talking about this for years, Scott, that we know China is focused on being the leader in the electronic vehicle category. That's one of their 2025 goals, and to see the truck out there, I think American pride.
Yeah, it's it gives me hope because we've been behind our competitors on this, both in building demand and in making these vehicles for more than a decade now. And you probably remember this as well as the who killed the electric car, right? First, it was the car companies that stood in the way of this, and fossil fuel industry, a lot of things, but obviously. Things are shifting dramatically. We realize that to reach our climate goals, we need to electrify our transportation systems. And I'll say, my wife and I have had a Chevy Volt for 4 or 5 years now. We love it. It's a great car, and I'm looking forward to the day, as you are, where we can get more of these on the road, where we get scale, where we have that federal tax credit kick in. Where we build out that charging infrastructure to make it possible, and that people are getting the keys to these vehicles. Right now we're behind. 2% of our vehicles in the United States are electric. That trails most other countries by a lot. And in terms of capacity, we have 4 lithium-ion battery facilities in the United States, like big capacity batteries. China has 93 of those factories. And so we're playing catch up, and they've invested hundreds of billions of dollars in their automotive sector to electrify it and to dominate the world. BYD, one of their companies, has said it wants to dominate the world's auto production in the decades to come. So we have our work cut out for us, but I'm glad that this president has a plan. I think it's a good plan, and it's built around not only people buying these vehicles, but ensuring that they are made in America.
Yeah, and this is all part of the American Jobs Plan, the investment in the job training and the research and development that's going to all go into this. And it's not just building the vehicle. For me, and I was just talking about this with Greg Regan a second ago, the fact that, we need better 5G technology. If this is how vehicles are going to speak to each other, if this is how the computer world's going to talk to each other, we have to have our own technology, because I don't trust the Chinese. I don't trust the communist Chinese government at all.
Yeah. Yeah, see, this is the perfect example of how silly the debate is about what is infrastructure. Because as you look ahead in the coming decades, the electrified vehicle fleet, 5G broadband, and then some, and an electric charging grid is infrastructure. Just as I'm sure Abe Lincoln, there may have been naysayers back when he wanted to do the Transcontinental Railroad, saying, well, what we have now is fine. Why do we need to do this? And so the folks who are pushed back on this are being silly and are living in yesteryear, really. I mean, $175 billion is, actually gives us a boost. It doesn't solve the problem for electric vehicles. That's what Joe Biden wants to spend on R&D, on tax credits, on building out that charging infrastructure, and as he said, making sure that it is made in America by union workers. And I love a president who is not only able to articulate that, but who is willing and eager to articulate that as well.
Yeah, and you see, now I'm in this pot. If we're going to spend $175 billion to invest in this vehicle, I want to make sure everything that goes into it is made here. I want that investment to have a reverberation effect across the economy, to where it's going to mean jobs, it's going to mean better lives for us, and the Henry Ford thing. We should be making enough money to where we can all buy one of these these lightning pickup trucks that I think it looked really cool in the video that I saw.
Yeah. Getting this right is so important, Rick, because the auto sector is it directly employs or supports 1 out of every 9 manufacturing jobs, which is an extraordinary amount around the country. Because you think of all the parts that go into a vehicle, the tires, the glass, the body, the thousands of parts that are in there, the semiconductor chips. And the electric vehicles are going to transform that supply chain in a lot of different ways. There'll still be glass, there'll still be metal, there'll still be tires, but the drivetrain is completely different than an internal combustion engine. And so it's going to shift things around, and it's important that we build that capability right here. And the battery is probably the most valuable component in the entire vehicle.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure those are made in America, because that's what's going to get that spin-off effect of jobs. Not only should we electrify and ensure that we are meeting our climate goals, but that we are also producing jobs at the same time. Otherwise, all of these efforts will dramatically lose public support if they see us losing out to countries like China.
Yeah, no, obviously there's going to be a massive retooling and a massive retraining that's going to have to go on. I think of all of the mechanics and all of the people who service cars. It's a whole new way of going about things. The gas stations that we have now are going to have to figure out how to incorporate, and some of them already have. There are a couple of places where you'll see a charging station, not nearly enough. But we're gonna have to make that transition, and that's got to be something that I believe the federal government has to do. This isn't something we can do just by people like me who want to do the right thing. It's got to be done as a matter of policy and a matter of direction, kind of almost like a Manhattan Project to save the planet.
Yeah, I completely agree. And obviously, some of the companies should have skin in the game. So obviously, Ford does, GM does on the automotive side. The energy companies need to have skin in the game, whether it's Shell, BP, or what have you, Exxon. But it will take a public investment to get this across the finish line. and a smart set of rules. Like, again, having that incentive to buy an electric vehicle to offset some of the cost or the green premium that we may be paying for a while, or ensuring that charging infrastructure is built out, because that's one of the biggest issues that potential buyers have, is range anxiety and the ability to quickly recharge or what have you. It's and so giving people that reassurance and also that monetary incentive is going to be key to making this a successful strategy. And look, we know it can work. I mean, Norway right now, I think at least 60% of their vehicles are EVs. Wow. And so it's entirely possible to do this. And as Joe Biden showed today, and as I know and others know, I mean, these are great vehicles. And once you get inside them, you want to keep driving them. And I'm proud that I drive a Union made in America vehicle, and I hope we'll get to see that all around the country as well.
Chevy Volt, right?
Yeah,
made
exactly.
What, in Lordstown, the shuttered Lordstown plant.
Yeah, I think the Chevy Volt was made actually in the in Hamtramck or in Michigan.
I think it was the Cobalt that was made.
Yeah, it's the Cruise that was made in Lordstown. But again, Lordstown has reinvented itself and is also making electric vehicles as well. I think commercial and large capacity trucks and what have you. And so we're seeing this come online. But there's a fierce competition for this, Rick. And there are going to be people that say, we ought to just bring this in from China because it's subsidized, it'll be cheaper. But that's a sure way to lose millions, and I'm serious about this, millions of manufacturing jobs in the United States. And those jobs will not be replaced.
Well, we're not just losing millions, losing millions more. I mean, you think of all of the auto parts jobs that we've lost over the years when Delphi went down. You look at all of you were talking about glass and all the components. We've lost a lot of those industries to where you can only get things from China. This is an opportunity to go back and undo some of the bad stuff we've done in the past, to where every bit of technology, every step forward, we outsource those jobs. Going back to the rotary dial phone, that's the last time we made phones in this country. Right. When they become push button, we ship those overseas. This is an opportunity to say that next technology, those are going to be the jobs of the future here.
Yeah. And something that I think separates from Biden's aspiration on climates from Obama or any other president who's talked about this in the past, Trump never talked about this, but any other president who's talked about this, is that Biden is not afraid to say, I'm going to use procurement. I'm going to make sure that the federal vehicle fleet is made in America and is electrified. And I'm going to make sure trade policy is better than it has been for workers in the past. And we're going to take labor cases, and we're going to make sure that there is a level playing field with respect to Mexico and China and other countries. And I think that's key to making this successful, because you can invest and you can invest and you can invest. And as long as there's a tilted playing field, we're going to be continuing to swim upstream rather than downstream on this. And so having the trade policy, having the procurement policy right, along with the tax credits, the R&D, the worker training, and the vision. That's what's going to make this a successful policy. And we should start seeing the dividends soon on this. I mean, those F-150s will start rolling out, within 2 years, I think. And so it's going to be an exciting time for kind of gearheads and folks that are interested in this and to have some American-made options.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Last line of questioning I've got for you, because, as we've been talking about the parts and the glass and all this stuff, we still have, the tariffs on steel, because we still need a steel industry. And to me, one of the main components of the car or any of those things going forward is having the capacity to produce the things that we need to do it. Where are we in the tariff talk? Because there are some who are saying we need to do away with it because we need that cheap steel to come in. Where are we in this moment?
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal just wrote a terrible editorial this morning saying that the tariffs have been a complete and utter disaster. I obviously disagree with that. And this was a Trump policy. It was not perfect. Biden could have easily walked away from it. He has not. In fact, senior cabinet officials like Commerce Secretary Raimondo, Trade Ambassador Tai have said the tariffs have been successful for the steel industry. They've cut down imports. These companies have invested $15 billion in modernizing their facilities. They've hired back workers. And now the EU, the European Union, the 28 countries of the European Union had threatened to double retaliatory tariffs on some American products like Harley-Davidson, like whiskey and bourbon, if the United States did not remove the tariffs by June the 1st. Well, we're not, and in fact, we reached an agreement with the European Union to talk seriously about the larger issue that beleaguers both of our steel industries, which is global overcapacity, which is driven by China. You have all these zombie steel mills in China that are churning out steel that no one needs, no one wants. It depresses the price. It engenders all sorts of bad behavior. It's cost a lot of jobs in the steel sector in the United States. And so the parties have committed to work on that with the hope of reaching an agreement by the end of the year. Ultimately, the Europeans don't want tariffs on their steel. But our message to the administration, to the Europeans, is that you got to get tough on China. And so far, you haven't been. You've been too kind to China with the Chinese government on this, and you got to toughen up. And you also have to reform your own steel market as well, and you have to boost your own internal consumption here, because the United States, even though we have these tariffs, we still import a lot of steel. It's not like we're a completely closed market, and so we just want other actors to behave the same way that we do. And to have that, and to achieve that level playing field for the steel industry. But those tariffs have to stay in place until we have that broader solution.
Yeah, I mean, we need that. And look, I've been a supporter of tariffs for a very long time, even though, a lot of my lefty friends are, Trump did it, so we've got to be against it. That kind of knee-jerk reaction. It's one of the things I gave Trump credit for. I wish it was part of a bigger, more comprehensive plan to bring the rest of the world in. But on that vein, that was one thing I think he did right.
Yeah, and you're right. It was a bit of a clunky response. Wasn't perfect, a little bit arbitrary, but it nevertheless produced some results for the steel industry. It left a mess for Joe Biden to clean up, and I think Biden's going about it the right way. He wants to create demand here at home through infrastructure, other things that are going to cause steel to be produced and to be consumed, and also find this broader solution, because Trump didn't do anything about the overcapacity in the steel sector, or the fact that when you need one lemonade stand on a block but you have 10, it's going to drive everybody out of business. And that's exactly what's happening with the Chinese steel sector, and why, together with Europe, we need to come down and say you can't do that.
No, I'm right there with you. But I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to these new F-150 Lightning pickup trucks. I can't wait to where they're on the market, and maybe we get a hold of one. But Scott, I appreciate the time and the information. As always, great talking with you.
All right. We can keep it made in America, Rick. Thanks so much, man. Good
stuff. Our good friend Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing, AmericanManufacturing.org, the website. Check out their website. We'll get links out on social media. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day an Oklahoma City jury found in favor of the estate of Karen Silkwood. Karen worked as a lab tech at the Cimarron nuclear plant operated by the Kerr-McGee Corporation. Karen joined the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers International Union during a 1972 strike at the plant. She walked the picket line, returning to work once the strike was ended. Karen remained very concerned about safety standards in the plant. So much so that she decided to serve on the union's bargaining team. She also agreed to secretly collect documentation of the plant's negligence. In November, she did a routine self-check and found she had higher than normal levels of plutonium, an incredibly deadly substance in her body. Further investigation found her home was contaminated as well. She became convinced that her employer was attempting to poison her. Kerr-McGee accused Karen of poisoning herself to put nuclear companies in a bad light. Despite her her fears, Karen pressed on with her investigation. She was on her way to meet with a union representative and a reporter from the New York Times when she died in a mysterious car accident. She was allegedly carrying a manila folder of documents related to her investigation. The documents were never found. Evidence showed that she was likely forced off the road by another vehicle. The jury found the company at fault for the plutonium contamination, awarding more than $10.5 million in damages. The company fought the verdict and eventually settled with the family for $1.38 million. In 1983, Meryl Streep starred in a movie, Silkwood, telling the story of this incredible woman who gave her life fighting for worker safety. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Outrageous, screeched the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. It doesn't feel fair, whimpered a top corporate executive. The wailing by those who run corporate America is not for the plight of the workaday families who've seen their income stagnate and even plummet to zero during the past months of the coronavirus pandemic. Rather, this chorus of woe comes from powerful plutocratic interests that have been enjoying windfall profits. Why? Because, they cry, that meanie in the White House, Joe Biden, intends to jack up their corporate tax rate. But wait. Didn't Trump and the GOP Congress slash the corporate share of our nation's upkeep nearly in half just 4 years ago, shifting the burden to the middle class and poor? Yes. And didn't they promise that those cuts would create millions of new jobs? Yes again. Yet, corporations got richer and working stiffs got shafted. Still, here they come again, howling that raising corporate taxes would crash the stock market. Well, the day Biden announced his plan, stock prices did fall by less than 1%. The next day, they bounced right back, and they're still booming. Moreover, those are crocodile tears the rich are shedding, for they know that, as Biden himself makes clear, his proposed uptick in their tax share, quote, is not going to affect their standard of living at all, not a little tiny bit. They'll still have their 2 or 3 big houses, private jets, and yachts. But with them paying just a little bit more toward the common good, our country will be able to reinvest in society's physical and human infrastructure, making America stronger and fairer for all. This is Jim Hightower saying that's why there is broad and deep public majorities, even among Republicans, for Biden's infrastructure plan and for the taxes to pay for it. For more information, go to americansfortaxfairness.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is made possible by you lowdowners who subscribe to our monthly newsletter, The Hightower Lowdown. You know who you are. Thank you.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, I'm looking at during the break, I'm looking at the F-150 Lightning, what they've put out for it. And this is, I'm not a big gearhead. I'm not somebody who's, big into cars. I'm very utilitarian. Something that's going to get me to point A to point B. But that looks really, really cool. And I'm excited about the fact that, we may have the ability for the first time in this country's history to really do that right when new technology comes online, that we do it right. I shouldn't say in the country's history. You go back to after the New Deal, we did benefit from a lot of technological changes, and we did do it right then. But that brief period of time, that created the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization, and they did do it right. But you stop and you think about it, and as I was talking to Scott, I was remembering a guy named James Steele. I think we had him on the program not too long ago. They wrote a book called America, What Went Wrong. It's back in the 90s they wrote it. And, they were talking about, how we lost industries. The new technology, corporate America was moving everything overseas. And one of the examples they gave was the rotary phone. The rotary phone was made at a factory in Chicago, employed, like 3,000 or 4,000 people. And that's what they did. That was their pride. They crafted the best rotary phone you ever did see. Problem is everyone was going to push button phones. And the company never retooled. They just left those workers to languish and out the door with you. You're on your own. Sorry. And they moved that factory, that line of work elsewhere. And then came the cordless phone. Somewhere else they did that. Then came the cell phones, and now all that stuff's made in China. And you could thank Apple for that, because Apple makes the mass of their phones in China, and they've basically sold their soul to the devil to get the cheap labor. As I say, the heroin that CEOs need. Exploitable cheap labor and lax environmental regulations. That's the heroin for corporate CEOs. But the fact that, in this moment, we may have a chance. And I'll tell you what's interesting is, where I started with this idea of woke capitalism. And I'm hoping that we wake up. I'm hoping that we get woke at some point in the near future. I do hope we're getting there. That we wake up to the reality that for 40, 50 years, we've been getting the short end of the stick. That wages have been stagnant and declining, and health benefits have been eroding, and the burden of healthcare is now on the individual instead of something that was part of your employment package. Retirement security's all but gone. You're on your own, but you're going to be a millionaire. What was created as a good environment, as what generations of workers fought for, has all been but eviscerated because of the greed of corporate America has forced this. And now what you end up with people working 2-3 jobs just trying to make ends meet. And I point to this study done by the World Health Organization and the International Labor Organization. They point out that working more than 55 hours a week is dangerous. They say that if you work more than 55 hours a week, you have a 35% higher risk of having a stroke, 17% higher risk of having heart disease compared to those folks working 35 to 40 hours a week. They also point out that about 9% of the global population works more than 55 hours a week. And they claim that working long hours, just putting in all those hours, is more dangerous than any of the other occupational hazards. You think the AFL-CIO came out with their death on the job. They say that some 95,000 people die a year from occupational exposure to chemicals and whatever. The number that they're throwing out, staggering. They're saying that people who worked more than 55 hours a week resulted in 745,000 deaths in 2016, up from what they estimated in 2000 to be 590. They say that almost 400,000 of those deaths were because of stroke, 347,000 of them were because of heart disease, stress. All of that stuff, plays into that. And I think this is one of those things that, we as working people should coalesce around the idea that we shouldn't have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week to make ends meet. I go back to that fight for 8-hour day, for the 8-hour day, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. When they were fighting from the sun up to sundown schedule to just get to an 8-hour day. And they wanted, those 8 hours to be compensated at the same rate as that sun up to sundown schedule so that they could continue to exist and live. We're kind of in one of those moments. And, it's amazing to me, how we have allowed corporate America to skate off without being held accountable. And I point to Kroger, and Kroger's one of my favorite chew toy companies because they're one of the companies who during the big pandemic begrudgingly gave their employees a $2 an hour raise. That was for about 2 months. And then immediately they clawed it back. We find out now that in 2020, Kroger's CEO, or his chief executive, Rodney McMullen, he saw his pay package go up by 6%, to $22.4 million. Now understand, the average worker at Kroger makes, I don't know, 24 grand a year, and their wages fell by 8%. I mean, I look at this and I'm going, am I missing something? The CEO who didn't bag one bag of groceries, who didn't put one can on the shelves, didn't unload one truck, didn't ring up one order, somehow he's making $22.4 million in a pandemic year where the person who we called a hero, we called them essential, their wages actually fell 8%. I mean, it's quite remarkable when you stop and you think about it. And now we're calling those people lazy because they won't go back to these crappy jobs. And this is where I go back to the hope that maybe we are. I hope we're seeing a moment of woke capitalism. I'm hoping we wake up. I'm hoping we wake up to the reality that for way too long, we've been getting screwed. In fact, the Rand Corporation, about a year and a half ago, did a study that said that, we've been getting ripped off each and every year for the last 45 years in excess of $2 trillion in wages stolen from the working class and upward, redistributed upward. And in my lifetime, and look, every working person of my generation and a little bit older, you talk to them and you ask them the same questions. 30 years ago, what kind of wages were you making? 40 years ago, what kind of wages were you making? Did you have a better standard of living? Were things easier? And the answer was yes. In every case that I've talked to somebody who said, I'm doing the same kind of job. I'm in the same industry, but things have gotten harder because we're asked to do more. We're tracked much more. Productivity has gone through the roof, but our compensation deadline. And they always throw out competition from overseas. Health insurance costs. We got a CEO we've got to pay $22.4 million to that we didn't 30 years ago. We've got shareholders that we've really got to please so they can line their pockets. Something wrong with the system. And people know this. And I've been talking about this for a while now. This is where the anger comes from. This is where the Trump rose from. People are ticked off. And I'm hoping that the Trump voter, I'm hoping the MAGA head, I'm hoping he gets woke real soon. I'm hoping he wakes up to the fact that capitalism's been screwing him over. Now, I had somebody say to me, well, then that means you're a communist. No, that's not the choice. The choice is not communist or capitalist. The choice is what actually works for working people. Can we dull the razor's edge of capitalism as our grandparents' generation did? Can we have workers sitting down and negotiating with their employers for the wealth that their labor creates, as we did then? And again, there's a lot of great graphs out there that show, productivity and wages walked hand in hand. The more we did, the more we made. Meritocracy. Because as Americans, we believe that. I mean, it's almost in our DNA. It's been hammered into our heads for so long that it's something that we now kind of believe. Hasn't been true for a while, sadly. And this again comes back to the lack of bargaining power that a lot of people don't have anymore. So as I look at this moment, I look at this president that we have, and I'm grateful for him. I'm grateful for the fact that he's talking about how do we reinvigorate our economy to serve everybody. I have a friend who his question is always, what is an economy for? What good is it? What good is it to have an economy if people can't feed their children? What good is it to have an economy if a large percentage of people can't buy a home or send their kids to college or take care of themselves when they're sick or, come up with $400 in an emergency? What good is it to have an economy when you have desperate workers who are just on the treadmill and just keeping up? And in this moment, this blip of a moment, when they get this little bit of extra unemployment money that Republicans want to rip out of their hands as quick as possible to get them back to crummy jobs, that they choose not to, that they choose to go, no, I'm gonna wait out to find if I can get a better deal. I'm hoping they're woke. I'm hoping they wake up. And this isn't partisan. For me, this isn't about Republicans or Democrats or independents or anyone. This is about working people. This is about, if you punch a clock, your paycheck hasn't been going as far as it did 10, 20, 30 years ago. Your standard of living continues to fall, even though you're working your behind off. That's what I'm talking about. The politics all aside, we got into this mess because of the political decisions of the past. How do we fix those? You got someone like Josh Hawley, who claims to want to be, the guy who cares about the working class. He's a working man senator, he'll tell you. Yet he's against the minimum wage. He's against people organizing, against labor laws. He's against all the things that built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. But he's a man of the people. The only senator to vote against the Asian American and Pacific Islander hate bill today. The only senator. Certainly on the wrong side of history there, and on the wrong side of policy that's going to help move us in the right direction. I think Biden's going to be that guy. I think the investments that we're making are smart if he can get them through. I think the investments that need to be made and what we can do to transform our economy are long overdue, and they've got to be us-centric. That's my view. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1933. That was the day President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the Tennessee Valley Authority Act. The act created the TVA as a federal corporation and was tasked to address the resource development of the region, one of the poorest in the nation. These included flood control and improved travel along the Tennessee River. It also meant improved forestry to address soil erosion and facilitation of agricultural production. Control of water resources required a series of dams designed to navigate the river and reduce flooding. Though Wilson Dam had been completed before the establishment of the TVA, the authority had embarked on the construction of 16 more dams. During the Depression, the TVA hired tens of thousands of workers for conservation, construction, and development. Historian Eric Loomis notes that though the TVA was one of the region's largest employers of black workers, the authority also maintained rigid lines of segregation in its workforce. He adds that though 14 AFL unions eventually worked on dam construction, the agency initially refused to recognize unions. Workers would have to wait until 1940 to sign first contracts in the anti-union South. Today, the authority is most well known for its supply of electricity to nearby communities. It is the nation's largest public power company and serves about 80,000 square miles in the southeastern United States. TVA capacity to generate electric power includes some 29 hydroelectric dams, 11 coal-fired power plants, 3 nuclear plants, and several combustion turbine installations. It also has several solar and wind installations. The authority produces more than 130 billion kilowatt hours of electricity each year. The TVA played a critical role in transforming the South by constructing infrastructure necessary for modernization and industrialization.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
My grandfather always used to say, if you've done something wrong, He used the F word. If you're effing up, be the only one who knows it. Don't tell anyone, because then you've got only about a 50% chance of getting ratted out. And I've had people push back. Well, you can trust people. No, you can't. You can't. You can trust no one. If you've got a secret, keep it to yourself. Take it to the grave with you. This guy, Daniel Warmus of Alden, New York. Evidently, Daniel, on January 6th, was one of the folks involved in the Capitol. Evidently, got some attention, did some stuff. Was one of the invaders into our Capitol and was getting away with it. No one knew who he was. No one could find him. Genius here, I guess, decided it was time to get his teeth fixed, do a little time there at the dental office. And while he's in the dentist chair, I just decided to blab about that he was there and show some videos of himself, show videos of his treason. So, of course, someone turned him in. And he was arrested today. Evidently, he was telling the dentist how he was smoking marijuana in the Capitol. Sharing his experience with the folks who listened. And you go, at what point did you not think someone might be angry that you invaded our Capitol? And now you're sharing your treason and the video, the recording of it. Yeah. I guess it just is what it is. But there he is with his Trump button on his shirt and all of that. And hopefully he spends a little time in jail. Good for him. Also, thank goodness for Tennessee. I don't know what it is about these religious states that they feel the need to punish people for who they are. Today at the polls, there was a transgender woman who came through. Very nice, took one of my little flyer things and was very pleasant. Went on her way. Did not care. The people around us did not care. Living her life. Good for her. Evidently now in Tennessee, thanks to Governor Bill Lee, who they say has signed one of the cruelest anti-trans laws in the nation. It's now going to require that businesses who actually allow transgender people into their stores, which is just freaky weird that we would have to do this. Now they're going to have to warn the cisgender people, and I was weird by that word, but evidently have to warn everyone that there's going to be those people here, and have to post it, I guess. It's evidently the second bill restricting transgender access to public accommodations that have been signed into law. And you look at this and you go, you do know these folks have been with us for a very long time. They've been around us and probably didn't notice until Republicans got something up there, that now they've got to torture somebody. They need a political enemy. And again, these are supposedly the people who tell us that they believe in life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. It's bizarre. Anyway, the new Tennessee law requires any building or facility open to the general public, that going to allow those people to come in. They're going to have to post a sign that reads, and I quote, "This facility has a policy of allowing the use of restrooms by either biological sex, regardless of the designation on the restroom." I actually don't know what that means, so maybe it won't be such a big deal. But Governor Lee signed that HB 1182 into law. I'm waiting for something like that to come through here in Pennsylvania, and I know I've got a crazy representative who I believe has proposed an anti-trans bill, not allowing trans girls to play sports. oddly enough, didn't do one for the other gender. There's no trans male anti-sports bill. Didn't see that. I think if you're going to do one, you got to do the other. Now, here in Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf is never going to sign that, and it's basically gone nowhere. And they use it. Understand why they do this. They use this to rile up the base, to get people all tingly and wadded up in the panties, so that they give them money. It's really what it's about. It's not about people living their best lives. It's not even that they probably know anyone who is trans. Me personally, I don't care. As I've always said, don't worry about me. Worry about yourself. Let people live their lives. We just live in a really weird time where politically one of the parties has lost their minds. And this is the stuff that riles them up. Kids going hungry, veterans going homeless, families being broken, jobs paying poverty wages, opportunity being diminished. That doesn't bother them. In fact, they'll tell you flat out, a little inequality is good. Makes those poor people work harder. But if we can beat up on someone like this, hey, great. Makes us feel better about ourselves. Sick, sadistic, and scary all at once. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk to economist Matias Vernengo about the potential, the possibility. Been hearing it a lot. Inflation's coming. We're going to be Zimbabwe before we know it. I'll right back with Matias. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Chaos left in the wake of Colonial Pipeline's ransomware attack.
Calls grow for federal oversight of energy infrastructure cybersecurity.
The city can't seem to catch a break. It's still reeling from Hurricanes Laura and Delta last year and an ice storm in February.
More disasters for Lake Charles, Louisiana. Pipeline company defies Michigan governor's shutdown order. Plus,
for the second time in a little more than 3 months, a refinery has rained oil over homes on the Caribbean island of St. Croix.
EPA shuts down U.S. Virgin Islands refinery as imminent threat to public health.
All of those disaster tales and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It is so long to snow days for New York City students. The Department of Education says that it will now keep 2 practices from last year. During severe weather, students will shift to remote learning instead of canceling school. And Election Day will also be a remote instruction day.
That's right, kids. The bad news is snow days are over. The good news is, thanks to climate change, soon there won't be any more snow. Yeah!
This is your Green News Report.
Oh, that's not a good thing?
Okay, Desi Doyen, more trouble, really, for Lake Charles, Louisiana?
Yes, unfortunately, as we go to air, another flooding emergency has been declared in Louisiana and Texas after more than 17 inches of rain fell in 12 hours in some areas on Monday.
Really?
Especially hard hit was beleaguered Lake Charles, Louisiana, which is still trying to repair and recover from damage caused by those 2 major hurricanes last year, Laura and Delta, and that deadly February ice storm that knocked out power to several states. You've likely heard by now that Colonial Pipeline paid $5 million in ransom to hackers and
Yes, you heard it here on the Green News Report when I told you the Colonial paid off for the ransom, and then, of course, an hour or 2 later, they finally admitted it.
Yes, they did.
You're
and
welcome.
Colonial intentionally shut down the pipeline because the hackers prevented it from billing its customers. The widespread disruption that caused has led to broad calls for the federal government to establish the first ever minimum cybersecurity standards for the nation's critical infrastructure. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, in an interview with The Hill, noted that about 85% of U.S. infrastructure is privately owned, with almost no federal cybersecurity protections.
An enormous responsibility comes with that stewardship. And I do think we need to take a real look at a policy level at what's being done when you have data at stake, when you have security at stake. Private actors have public responsibilities, and when that's the case, we do need to make sure there's the right oversight.
Even Republicans and Democrats in Congress agree on the need to develop cybersecurity regulations for both the private and public energy sectors, including requiring companies like Colonial to inform the federal government when they're victims of a major cyber attack. However, Huffington Post reports that fossil fuel lobbyists like the American Petroleum Institute are already working hard to block such requirements for the nation's oil and gas industry.
Of course they are.
Showdown in Michigan, pipeline company Enbridge has defied Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer's orders to shut down its troubled 70-year-old Line 5 pipelines that run under the Straits of Mackinac in the Great Lakes. The Canadian oil company Enbridge has refused, saying the state doesn't have the authority to shut it down. Whitmer terminated the easement that allowed Enbridge to operate the pipelines, citing its abysmal safety record, and the governor is now threatening to go after Enbridge's profits.
An international incident.
In the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Biden Environmental Protection Agency has taken the extremely rare step of invoking its emergency powers under the Clean Air Act to order the temporary shutdown of the Lime Tree oil refinery for 60 days, citing, quote, an imminent risk to public health. The accident-prone refinery had been shuttered for years due to serious environmental violations, but the Trump administration allowed private equity owners to reopen it in February. Since then, the refinery has rained oil on residents, contaminating St. Croix's drinking water supplies, and several times released toxic gases that sickened hundreds of people and forced schools to close.
So this thing is finally shut down?
Only temporarily, until an investigation can be conducted.
Well, I hope it's a really long investigation.
Finally, some good news. The Biden administration has begun the process of repealing a Trump-era regulation that officials at the time admitted was intended to block the EPA from writing new air pollution rules. The Trump rule tried to restrict the EPA's cost-benefit analysis of new public health standards by eliminating the benefit part, preventing the agency from considering co-benefits of cleaner air like lower costs from killing fewer people. It was intended to help polluting industries find a way to legally challenge future pollution rules by making new standards appear to be too costly to industry with no benefits. The Biden EPA has now launched the process to roll back that rule.
Thank God we have a new president. Not a moment too soon. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So today, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen gave a speech before the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that I cannot imagine went over really well. Kind of like a lead balloon, I would imagine. But she called on business leaders to agree to pay higher taxes. That's going to happen. Also, I'm not sure which one they would balk against more, paying higher taxes or backing stronger labor unions. This is the Chamber of Commerce that she's saying, nope, we need higher taxes, we need stronger labor unions, and she went on to say we need to lower barriers to foreign competition. I can't imagine they were all too thrilled about it, but we'll see what comes out of it, because at least the first two I absolutely agree with. And here to share some thoughts on, well, that, and also the talk of, I can't tell you how many emails I've got from people saying, Joe Biden's causing all this inflation. We're going to need wheelbarrows to buy bread like Zimbabwe. We're going to be Zimbabwe. Remember, not too long ago we were going to be Greece. Now we're going to be Zimbabwe. Here to share some thoughts on if that's going to be the case, and if if the lack of fear is right on my part, I've asked our good friend Matias Vernengo to come talk with us. Matias is an economics professor at Bucknell University. Matias, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rick.
So we're going to need a wheelbarrow, Matias. Huge amount of money just to buy a loaf of bread because inflation's going crazy.
Yeah, well, that's very unlikely that inflation will get out of hand. I wouldn't be concerned. This kind of preoccupation is recurrent. It often happens when you get a Democrat in power that is trying to get the economy again back on track, and Republicans that cut taxes and increase spending on the things that they like, which is mostly corporate welfare and military spending. Then there is no risk of inflation, but the fears of inflation and the need for fiscal adjustment and austerity come all back under these circumstances. So it's not surprising that we get this discourse, but the possibilities of inflation are limited, and in fact for reasons that there is a, let's put it this way, where does the risk of inflation, the real risk of inflation, might come from? And there has been some supply constraints associated to the recovery itself and the fact that the pandemic was sort of a peculiar kind of crisis,
right,
not your regular recession. So we do have snags in certain parts of the production structure. For example, chips, computer chips, which
sheet of plywood,
cars, and so on and so forth. So there is a scarcity of those, and chip plants are hard to build, and it takes time. And we're in the middle of a dispute, also international dispute with China, and so that may have an impact. There is an impact associated to some prices of commodities. But back in the 70s, I always say this is not that 70s show when inflation really got out of hand. And why that happened back in the 70s? Because you did have supply side constraints. It was the oil shocks, which much higher than anything that is going on right now. But on top of that, we have a strong militant labor force and an economy that was really closer to full employment because participation rates were high. And so once you had inflation, the working class could go out and say, you know what, we want to recover what we lost. And that led to spirals of prices and wages. And of course, that meant that inflation was, sustained. There's no chance of that right now. I mean, I do hope that we get into a strong recovery, and I think we're going to get into particularly if we do pass the infrastructure plan. But we are getting into recovery, so we certainly have a nice recovery going on. But I don't think we're going to hit full employment immediately, or that participation rates will get sort of high immediately. For all the sort of good ideas that, and I think that the administration has sort of put out so far, it's unlikely that we're going to redress all the issues over the last 30 years, 40 years in the labor market. So
right.
So the idea that this is a labor market that, given some supply side constraints, will sort of take into runaway inflation is absolutely preposterous. So I think that there's very little chance of that.
Now, to highlight your point, and you triggered in my mind, my grandfather reminded me, years ago that during the 70s, their union contract had adjustments for inflation. That in a couple of years, they actually got 2 raises in a year because inflation was going up. And their contract had a leveler in there to where it hit a certain bit, their wages kept up with it. And sadly, we don't have many people having those contracts anymore, which is why it seems like our standard of living continues to fall, because wages have deadlined, and our ability to demand higher wages and demand inflationary higher wages, not there.
Not there. Yeah, no. So, and again, I'll say something almost, heretical here. So I wish we do get to some point at which we have pushback and some sort of inflation coming from. I mean, a little bit of inflation wouldn't hurt us, if real wages going up, I'm for a little bit of that. So, moderate inflation is better than deflation. So,
right.
And if it comes with workers doing, better, so the standards of living of the working class people improving, I'm all for that. But, I don't think we're in a situation that, that will happen overnight. I mean, in my most optimistic wild dreams, I don't think that that's the case. So I don't think we're on the verge of runaway inflation, let alone something as ridiculous as, Zimbabwe and hyperinflation and something like that. So that's really out of the realm of possibilities. We're not close to that. So,
but you watch some of these business shows, they're all losing their minds, though. They're worried about woke capitalism, that corporations are actually listening to customers and inflation, because Joe Biden gave $300 in extra unemployment to people to be a little more judicious in the crummy jobs that they take. That's going to ruin society because we don't have a glut of cheap, exploitable labor anymore.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. So the notion that the problems that are associated also. So this notion is that we're not at full employment, but because we have the sort of three packages, two to one at the end of the Trump and the one in March with $1.9 trillion and whatnot, that extended the very needed sort of unemployment insurance extensions and the payments associated to COVID and all of those things. The notion that issues in the labor market are associated at the end of the day with that kind of needed help for people that are in a dire situation, it's absurd. So again, the issues in the labor market, at the end of the day, are associated to poor quality jobs and even if they paid more, again, those would pass a little bit to the consumer, but it wouldn't be anything that would cause an acceleration of inflation. So those risks are exaggerated. Hyperbole is part of the game, I suppose. So that's not a new thing. So I think, actually, if you ask me, I'll say my fear is that we're not going to do enough, because all of this push is clearly not just for Republicans, but to get those within the Democratic Party, and we do have those, that. So people like Larry Summers, that I mean, in all fairness, they're surprisingly outsiders this time around. But those exist, and Larry Summers was doing, complaining about the size of the fiscal package. He already wanted to sort of reduce the size. Have Manchin and other Democratic senators that don't necessarily want a very large fiscal package, and part of the reason is they suggest that we'll have inflation, this is too much, you won't be able to pay, and so on and so forth. And all of those things are inflation is sort of an exaggerated fear. The notion that we're not going to be able to pay is an exaggerated fear. The notion that this is too large is an exaggerated fear. And my fear is exactly that we're not going to be bold enough to do all of the things that we need in order to promote a more healthy recovery.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't seem to be, squawking too much when they gave $1.9 trillion to corporate America and the very wealthy through Trump's tax cuts. But when we were giving it out to poor people, we were giving checks out to workers to try and make it through the pandemic and maybe even get a little bit ahead. Apoplectic, the sky's falling. They're going to be lazy, because if you give them too much, they'll be lazy for work, which is why you've got all of these governors across the U.S., all these Republican governors, refusing federal money, cutting off unemployment benefits, making work requirements part of it again, to try and force people back into low-wage jobs.
Yes, that's way too soon, by the way. I mean, we shouldn't be imposing any kinds of requirements. We should be moving full ahead in order to get the infrastructure package, which is long overdue. And in all fairness, any reasonable Republican back in the past would have been for most of the things that are in the infrastructure, at least package, the one that it's whatever to the half of the thing. So the $2.3 trillion. That's about transportation and clean water and strengthening some industries that are essential even for defense reasons. So all of those things should have been a no-brainer. So the fact that there is pushback on this says a lot, and it's political, I should say. It's not just a question of. I think that the other danger is that if we don't do those things, next year in the midterms, Democrats will have a very hard sort of, election, and then it will be like with Obama. So there is a risk of repeating. I feel, I don't want even to say it because I'm afraid of bringing that kind of scenario. So if we're not bold enough, what may happen next year and the possibilities for the rest of the Biden, administration will be completely sort of curtailed, and there'll be no space for more bold action. So he needs to be really bold, and that includes, at this point, I think, we should be talking about ending the filibuster, moving ahead. I mean, I don't think we will not have, and we've seen this movie, he will not have any votes from Republicans on further fiscal expansion, because I think that the more reasonable Republicans, and I mean reasonable, those that don't necessarily believe in complete conspiracy theories and stuff like that they can still sort of reason minimally. They know that if the Congress passes all of these fiscal stimulus measures, it's very hard to get rid of a re-elected Democratic administration in 4 years, so that's, I think, the sort of fear here. So it is purely political and electoral, and no concern for what might happen with the country, and certainly not with the working people in the country.
I was a little more blunt than you were. I said if they don't get this infrastructure package done, and they don't get it done quick enough to where people's lives actually get better, they're going to get slaughtered next year. And that I believe is going to happen, which is why they've got to move on this quickly. It's got to be done before August, so that maybe you get a little bit more construction time this summer, fall, and then it really kicks in next year, before the election, so people's lives are doing a little bit better. But I want to go back to the low wage workers, because they keep talking about there's a labor shortage. I'm sure you've seen every headline screaming, we've got this great labor shortage, thousands of jobs, and these people won't take them. Isn't this a moment, I mean, you're the economics professor, isn't this a moment where if there's a shortage, if there truly is a labor shortage, that wages should be skyrocketing to meet the demand of those workers to win them back? Shouldn't working conditions get better? And isn't this what the Republicans have always told us that we kind of want? That's how we raise wages, not through unions and collective bargaining, but through the invisible hand of the market, demanding higher wages because workers are hard to get. Isn't this their worldview?
It should be. So it should be. And of course, here, one would imagine if we do that, and we continued with the helping people during the pandemic, and we do have a strong sort of infrastructure package through Congress, that the bargaining power of workers will go up in the middle of this, and we would be able. I mean, there are other things that have to happen. So don't get me wrong, regulation. That we know what happened with Amazon in Alabama. So all sorts of things were done to sort of preclude the unionization of workers through Amazon and Amazon. But the point is, we should expect better bargaining conditions for workers, and we should expect it, as I told them, that would be a good thing, a healthy sort of. We should have real wages going up ahead of inflation. That obviously will imply a little bit more of inflation, but a little bit of inflation is actually a good thing. We had the last 40 years, which been called by Ben Bernanke, who was the chairman of the Fed, first appointed by Bush, what he called the Great Moderation. This Great Moderation, has brought stability, price stability, but it has also brought stagnation of wages and the living conditions of the working class. So a little bit of inflation wouldn't be a problem. And of course, these shortages are stated not just to the poor working conditions that they provide, the low wages, but also first of all, we haven't completely gone out of the pandemic. So reasonably so, there are people that are not necessarily comfortable going back to certain kinds of jobs. And again, there is a rearrangement of the labor market in which certain sectors have been hit harder than others, and they have not fully recovered. So I don't think we will know exactly. I mean, we're not out of the woods in terms of I'm not an epidemiologist, but we're not out of the woods. So we don't have herd immunity yet in terms of the vaccination and whatnot. So the notion that everybody in the labor market, should go back and work and everybody's safe should be taken, I would say, with a grain of salt. And I think that that's part of what we see, that some people that can, delay their return to the labor market are doing so. And I think that that's a healthy thing. We botched last year. We botched completely the pandemic, and that had a significant economic effect, other than the brutal sort of human cost that it had. So I think that all of that is a good thing. We finally are trying to manage the pandemic in a reasonable way, and suggesting that health and human lives come before the labor market.
I'm right there with you. Last question I've got for you. You come from the university setting. There's talk of Biden forgiving some student loan debt, doing something around what has been a long-term problem for me, at least, for the last couple of decades. Would a forgiveness of like $50,000 in student loan debt, would that help? Is it something that we can afford? I've come around to the idea of the federal government should just buy up all the loans and have people pay them back at interest-free rates, and go that route. I'm curious how you see us dealing with this, what is turning into a crisis.
Oh, I think it is a crisis. It's a whole generation of people that basically has two mortgages. We tell kids, if you don't get a college degree now is what used to be a high school degree, so you need a college degree. And even if you go to a public state university, it costs a little fortune, so you have to get indebted. So we're basically telling people it's that peonage. So we're telling them, get indebted because you need that, and you need the college to have a decent job and wages in your future, and then you're paying for the rest of your life all of this. So I think we, in terms of how you do it, there's more than one way to do it. I'm fine with the idea of the government buying the loans and having a good chunk of that pardon, other part being paid at low rates and so on and so forth, subsidizing education. I think we should also spend quite a bit and subsidize public education directly, so that public universities should be cheaper. Something that Bernie Sanders had talked during the campaign. So I think we should endorse something along those lines. I think we definitely. We cannot afford not to do it. That's the important thing. So the idea that education and knowledge are central for the future of the country is absolutely correct. But that should be fundamentally funded by the federal government. So that's an important part of what a progressive agenda should have at the center. Moving forward. So yes, I definitely think that that's a good idea to reduce payments and to have a long-term solution also for the affordability of college education for the vast majority of people. And we should provide also access to working class people, minorities, for first generation college, kids, and so on and so forth. Further, incentives to get college education at a reasonable, affordable, price that they don't get indebted for the rest of their lives.
No, I'm right there with you, and I think we can do all this, and we still won't be Zimbabwe.
No, there's no chance that we're going to be Zimbabwe. So the other thing that people tend to forget is that United States, it's still, nothing has changed in the last 50 years. So this August, it will be the 50th anniversary that Nixon closed the gold window. August 15 of 1971. And the dollar, everybody was afraid that the dollar will stop being the key currency globally. And that has not changed. More or less 60% of global reserves were held in dollars. Back then, it's still fundamentally the same these days. It fluctuates sometimes, but it's essentially the same. The dollar is still the vehicle currency, meaning that most transactions globally are done in dollars. So the reign of the dollar has not sort of significantly changed. I'm not saying it will be there forever, but certainly there is no no clear sort of reason to think that this will change anytime soon. And so that means that in the foreseeable future, the United States has the currency. I mean, remember this, 2008, September, Lehman Brothers collapses, financial crisis in the United States. In any other country, if you have a financial crisis at the center of your own sort of, banking sector, everybody runs for another currency. So if you're in Argentina, where I come from originally, if you have a crisis in in an important bank in Argentina, everybody runs for the dollar. So globally, September 2008, everybody ran for U.S. government treasuries because that was considered safe, because that's what will not sort of go into default. And so the notion that the United States can borrow at very low rates at this point, they are close to zero. So it's absolutely insane to think that there is any danger of not being able to pay or borrow by the U.S. government. So public debt actually is safe. It's private debt with people that don't have enough to pay back because their wages are not good and do not increase over time, that it's unsustainable. So we should be afraid of too much private debt, not too afraid of public debt.
There you go. Matias, as always, great stuff. I appreciate you taking some time for us. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, our good friend Matias Vernengo. Let's take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around and listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day that Maggie Kuhn stood before a group of reporters to tell them about her organization, the Gray Panthers. The idea for the group had started 2 years earlier. 65-year-old Maggie had received the unwelcome news that she was going to be forced to retire from her executive position with the United Presbyterian Church. Maggie was not ready to retire. Instead, she started to organize. This was during the era of the Vietnam War protests, and Maggie found allies with young people who also wanted to see changes in society. The original group developed to build connections between young and old. They called themselves the Consultation of Older and Younger Adults for Social Change. Later, they shifted their name to the catchier Gray Panthers. The Panthers adopted the motto, Age and Youth in Action. In 1975, the Panthers held their first national convention in Chicago. 200 Panthers attended, representing 37 states. At the convention, the Panthers adopted a platform of issues. They included issues important to seniors, such as an end to mandatory retirement, better housing for the elderly, and expansions to rent control. But the platform also included other social justice issues, including support for the Equal Rights Amendment, a call for full employment, amnesty for Vietnam draft resistors, and even, after much debate, the legalization of marijuana. In the more than 40 years since their founding, the Gray Panthers have continued to advocate for a variety of issues. One key achievement was a court victory to make Medicare regulations more understandable to seniors, and they were years ahead of the nation by supporting single-payer health care for all. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, of course, Fox News would have an anti-mask nurse on the program to talk about why it's detrimental to children. Evidently, this New Jersey school nurse who was suspended for refusing to wear a mask and claiming that it's child abuse, and that masks don't protect children from COVID. This is what they put out. Now, I find it interesting that the experts are going, this woman's crazy. She shouldn't be anywhere near a school. Stop it. But you listen to the Fox clip of them actually giving this woman airtime to spew her nonsense, and it sounds like, oh yeah, I'm there with you. Just plain nuts. And according to her, the risk from the vaccine and the risk from continuing mask wearing is more detrimental than the actual virus to these children. We don't know what it means for kids long term. So do everything we can to make sure that they don't get it. That's the common sense part of it. Just because this quote unquote this nurse who probably got her license off the back of a matchbook, she's this anti-vax person, doesn't mean she's right. This is scary. This woman isn't any bit of authority. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.